Philippians 4. If you know your life is in God's hands, that is how you learn to be content. When our lives are in His hands, then we can have that peace that passes human understanding. Paul states, I have learned whatever state that I am in. I know how not to abound, and I know how to abound. The fruit that abounds to the ministry will abound to you for supporting the ministry. The fruit will abound to your account. You know, it's true that Paul needed things, no doubt. He needed food, he needed clothing, but really, what he really wanted was for that reward, that blessing. You can feed that a little? To go to the persons that help. And I think we learned that when he had the men that won that war, that he gave not only to the soldiers, but to the men that were left behind watching the things. And I've never heard this, but I wonder, when we throw down those crowns, if that's a semblance of this also. No matter who we are or what we've gained, that we're all together on this, working together for God. So when we give to this church, and Pastor Mike gives to Pastor Osborne, we're not there in Africa feeding those children and giving them clothes and shelter, but when we give, that is giving to them. Pastor Chuck says, this is a type of God's bookkeeping. God blesses you in other ways and gives to you in other ways. The Bible says, be careful for nothing. Philippians 4, 6-7. And Pastor Chuck says, this means don't put a lot of care behind anything. Don't worry. Don't have anxieties. But Chuck knew that this is a hard thing for all of us. So he even gave his own family stories. One time his wife Kay would hear a siren, and every time she was certain it was one of their kids. So one day at the market, they both were there. Chuck went in and did the shopping. Kay stayed back in the car. And he did hear a siren when he was inside the market. And then when he came out, Kay was gone. So was the car.
Oh.
So he said, I thought we were on good terms when I went into the market. Wonder what happened. And he gathered his groceries, pushed the cart to the end of the parking lot, and then carried them. About 2 blocks away from the market, there was Kay. So he put the items in the car, and he said, what happened? And Kay said, well, I heard a siren, but I was close enough to hear the address they were going to. And he said, our home address. So he thought, oh, it finally happened. All those times she was worried, and this happened. But here's the rest of the story. It wasn't their address. It was next door. By the time they pulled up, he'd heard the whole story. The teenager had cut down the eucalyptus tree, which picked up a hot wire, which lowered it to the ground, which started a grass fire. But all the kids were fine. They were out there watching the firemen put out the fire. Chuck says, be careful for nothing. And what this means is not to worry about anything. Chuck likes some of the Hebrew. I knew a word or two about that. Al Tadog, don't worry. It'll be okay. Jesus said, which of you by worrying can add 18 inches to your height? Thought about that. I do a lot of worrying. Could I worry away my weight? I would like to worry about 36 pounds. I would worry morning and night. I would sign up for that worry. I do it anyway. I worry a whole lot. And then I thought about it. Now I've been worried like 68 years, and I've never stayed on a diet more than 24 hours. Jesus chided Martha about being worried about everything, even food preparations. Luke 10:42. Chuck said, rather than worry, Paul said in everything by prayer and supplication, Let your requests be made known unto God. Philippians 4:6. And we've heard this question here during this study. How much is everything? The rhetorical question. The answer, everything. God says, cast all your cares on God. Pray about every single thing. Take those same things that create the care, the fear, the anxieties, and rather than worrying about these, place these in God's hands. Take these same cares and make these your exact prayers. Now, I know that we worry about things. We say, why did that have to happen? So a few weeks ago, February 10th, I got in a car accident, and I'm going to explain how I felt about that. I was really afraid. This was the same freeway, the same off-ramp, the same time. I've been doing this for weeks and probably a couple of years. And for the first time, an 18-wheeler hit me not once, but twice. It was pitch black, you couldn't see. So I'm going to try to describe this, my fear. So I'm driving and I'm holding onto the wheel, and he hits me. I don't see anything, and I go all the way to the right, and then all the way to the left, and it kept going that way, all the way to the right and all the way to the left. I'm thinking, I've never been taught, what do you do inside of a car accident? And so I just thought maybe God had me just hold on to the wheel. That's all I did. So while I'm going all the way to the right and all the way to the left, I'm just holding onto that wheel, and then eventually I'm going straight again. And I think, thank God. And then he hits me again. And then I go again, all the way to the right, and all the way to the left, and back and forth. And I don't know what to do. And now I'm really praying. I am really afraid. And then slowly, same thing, just holding on to that wheel. It slows up, and I'm okay. But then I got to tell you something about us Jews. When we're okay or something really good happens, we might think that we had something to do with it. We might forget about God. Let me give you some examples where God knew about this. Gideon's army, he made it real small, so they couldn't say it. They fought that great big army, and they're the reason. Or how about the time he made the enemy think that they heard a huge army, and so they thought maybe kings had rented an army, and that they were going to go get them. They left gold, they left silver, they left everything. Jews went in and collected. How about the time where God sent in one angel and he kills like 5,000 or some crazy number? And what about the time where the enemy was fighting themselves? How can the Jews take credit for that, right? And but they do, and I do. I know that I have that problem. So I started to think like that, and this is embarrassing to relate to you, but when that car steadied, especially the second time, I thought, I wonder if I had anything to do with that. Maybe I'm a better driver than I thought. I haven't had an accident in a while. Well, maybe that was me. Yeah, I was driving. 18-wheeler hits me, yeah, big deal. Then I'm driving, and he hits me, and again, yeah, hit me with your best shot. 3 times the charm. You got to have a good friend straighten you out when you start thinking that way, right? So my friend tells you, no, that's not the story. The story is you could have got really hurt. You could have lost a limb. You could have been paralyzed. You could have rolled. Even the driver, the 18-wheeler, said, I thought I kicked you off the road. Even he thought that. God probably had 2 angels holding onto that car on either side, not letting it rock all the way over. But that's the problem that I have. So, lacking, prideful, I think I had something to do with that. And God and my friend helped me to see we have to thank God so many times for the things we don't even know that he saves us from. So why did I have that accident, I wonder? To tell you a great story.
That was the outcome. You survived. Did the car?
Yeah. $17,000, like the insurance paid. So, Chuck says, it's all in this song, What a Friend We Have in Jesus. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. All things are working together for good, Romans 8:28. Peter says we're interested in today, in the moment, but God is interested in the eternal. Chuck says if someone loses their job, they go into a fear frenzy. And then God leads them to even a better job. And they say, I didn't even know I could make this much money. And then Chuck told this beautiful story, a true story. Members in his church were all working at the same hospital. And a woman was dying. But listen to what she does instead of fear. She was down to 70 pounds. Yet she was so joyful. She had this wonderful spirit that even doctors and nurses made excuses to go into that room because they wanted to be encouraged. She was dying and had a very short time to live, could die at any time, but she had such joy and such peace and such a blessing she was to others. She certainly demonstrated that peace that passes all understanding. God had this happen, allowed this to happen for good. We're concerned about the current situation and not the eternal. Be anxious for nothing, and the peace of God shall keep your hearts and your minds through Christ Jesus. The peace that passes all understanding. Philippians 4:6-7. I'm going to tell you 3 very short stories. I'd like you to think, could this person have pulled themselves out of this themselves? And what did God do to help? There was a baby strapped in a baby chair in a car, and the mom went off the cliff. And that car went round and round in circles. The mother was thrown from the car, and she went in and out of consciousness. A man was called to the scene who helps people in these deserted areas. He saw that she was going in and out of consciousness. He called the hospital and had a helicopter pick up the mother. When she went to the hospital, they decided to give her a comatose state because of that brain needed to rest. But right before that, she had a lucid moment, and in consciousness, she said, "How's my baby? Is my baby okay?" And went right back into unconsciousness. They called up the gentleman and said, "The mother that you brought in said there was someone else at that scene. There was a baby." He went back to that car. He saw the same thing he'd seen before. In the back seat was just a seatbelt kind of frayed, cut incorrectly. No baby. But then he backed up and he looked around that car, and then he found what he needed to see. There were footprints of a wolf, and like maybe something dragging beside it. He went further, following the footprints, and he saw a baby chair. He ran over to it. No baby. Now he's really worried the worst thing has happened. So he starts to follow those footprints, and he's looking for foxholes. He sees one, but it had spider webs. He eliminates that. But then he sees some more, but no baby's cry, no baby. And then it gets dark, and he's got to make a decision. If he went all the way home and came all the way back, that baby, if it went through that accident like that mother did, might have very little time to live. So he decided to stay. He had a makeshift tent that he used. He opened that tent, and he said to himself, if it's one wolf, maybe I can get out of this. But if it's a pack, I cannot. And he stayed. As soon as morning, he packed up that makeshift tent and got to the footprints again and followed them. And then he saw a cabin. He went over to the cabin, and there they were. A wolf had wound itself around a baby like a blanket. And when that wolf saw that man, he just left the baby there by itself. The man went over to the baby was warm to the touch. He called at the hospital and had that helicopter come and pick up the baby. The parents, when everyone was okay, the baby, the mother, the husband, the father, they wanted to see that cabin. They called up that gentleman and said, could you take the family to see that cabin where you found the baby? He said yes. But when he saw the mother and baby fine, the baby laughing, the husband smiling, he just started to cry. The second story is about a little boy. This little boy had been beat all his life, but he never told anyone the truth. So he was in the car with his father. His father was a raging alcoholic, and he would drive with the little boy in the car, and the little boy was so afraid. And that father threw the little boy from the car while the car was running. The little boy fell on the ground. He could barely move. He was in such pain. But worse than this, there was a bear, and he was certain that he was going to be harmed. The bear did nothing. The bear looked at him, and the bear put down his paw by the little boy. The little boy had no idea what does that mean, but it seemed like it wasn't going to hurt him. So he got up all his courage and drug his body onto that paw, and that bear put him on his back, put his nose in the air like he had caught a scent to follow. And he brought the little boy to an area where a husband and wife were eating. When they saw that bear, they quickly got up. The man went in front of his wife. He thought he was going to have to fight to survive. And the bear just left the baby there, the little boy rather, by himself. So the husband and wife went over to the little boy, put him in the car quickly, drove him to the hospital. They did an MRI scan, a functional one. And they saw the bruises, but all the little boy had said is that he fell from a moving vehicle. He didn't tell what his dad did, but they had an idea. And they said, we have bruises that are old and new, bruises that are healed and some not. We would like to know the rest of your story. And for the first time, he told the truth. He said, my dad drinks alcohol every day. He beats me every day. And sometimes he puts me in the car with him, and he drives horribly. And on this day, he threw me from the car while the car was running. When they knew the truth, the father came to the hospital. They arrested the hospital. They arrested the father, excuse me. They had the MRI, functional scan, and they had the little boy's story corroborating. Finally, he told someone the truth. The couple that had found the little boy had always wanted to have a baby, but weren't able to have children. They fostered that little boy, and as soon as they could, they adopted him. Here's the last story. You know this story, all of you here. Some of you might know the backstory. There was a little girl that was born with brain damage. She had a lack of oxygen. And in addition to this, she had epilepsy. Then she had a third diagnosis they didn't know for years. And the little girl, when she went to school, because of the epilepsy, would have fainting spells. And the kids would make terrible fun of her and beat her up. And then the teachers thought she was lying when she wouldn't answer. They thought she was being mean. That was the diagnosis they didn't know about, which was autism. She did have the answers. It took her a long time to think of what the answers were. And when she knew, they were on to a new question. So the teachers would beat her. And then worse than this, when she went home, her father would beat her. Her father was a coal miner. They had a total of 10 children. And this is called in my field, the counseling field, the identified patient. The identified patient is someone who would not be able to fight back. She was the one that received the beatings when the 10 children weren't fed because the father, as a coal miner, didn't make enough money. So she was afraid of everyone and everything and didn't trust anywhere. But the one thing that she did was she loved her mother. She loved her mother very much. Now, why her mother allowed that father to do that and didn't do anything, I have no idea. Maybe she thought, if with a husband I can't feed 10, how am I going to feed them without him? But the little girl loved her. She felt safe with her. When the little girl grew up, the father got sick, and do you know that she took care of that father? She said there were a lot of bad memories, but there were a few good ones. And she said that she had to own up to it, just kind of be realistic and realize this is it. And then he died. And then worse than that, her mother died. When her mother died, she felt this is it, the worst thing that could ever happen. But what it did is it propelled her to answer what her mother had always asked her to do. Her mother had said, I want you to go somewhere to be discovered, because I think you're going to be able to be discovered. She had never been able to keep a job. She would lose the job as soon as she got it. The mother took care of her until the mother died. But she did believe that the mother meant what she said. So she did audition. This is a rags to riches story. She became a multi-millionaire overnight, $45 million. People loved her all over the world. They loved her story. Some feel she's the best singer in all the world. I'd like you to please pick up the piece of paper you were given and please share if you do not have one. I can't sing today due to my throat, but I would really like if you make up the difference. And everyone please sing. And the song, I Can Only Imagine, the woman, 47-year-old at this point, Susan Boyle.